Good evening. My name is Amy Bach, and welcome to tonight's Roadmap to Recovery webinar on the subject of dealing with underinsurance. I'm so sorry for the circumstances that brought you with us tonight, but so glad that you were able to make the time to be with us. We curated tonight's educational program as specifically as we could for the situation as it's shaping up right now in the aftermath of the Marcia fire in Colorado, but also we know we have a number of California wildfire survivors with us. We will be touching a little bit on California and a lot on Colorado, but just so that you all know on the subject of underinsurance, the law in the state of California and the law in the state of Colorado are very similar. So the principles we're going to be going over tonight are equally valuable to you, regardless of which state you live in. We are offering tonight's program in English and Spanish. If you actually think you need to, no matter which language you want, you need to pick one. So you're going to go over to the right of your navigation bar, the Zoom bar, and hopefully you see a little globe icon that looks like that. And you're going to click on that and you're going to pick your preferred language. And that's what it should look like. Gracias. If you'd like to follow tonight's slide deck, you can go onto our website and go to the events tab, and then you'll see dealing with underinsurance, just like what this slide shows. And the slide deck is right there on the right, and you can open that up and follow along with us tonight. About United Policyholders. We are a reputable and established 501c3, not-for-profit. We have a platinum rating with the GuideStar, which monitors nonprofits. We have been a trusted information resource and a respected voice for insurance consumers throughout the United States for 30 years, with a proven track record and expertise in disaster recovery and insurance. We are not for profit, not for sale. We don't take money from insurance companies so that we can have an independent voice, but we know a lot about insurance and have spent a lot of time curating the information that we are bringing to you tonight. We're funded by donations and grants, and we particularly appreciate the Community Foundation of Boulder for having funded us early on so that we could jump right in to help after the Marcia fire, and then our California funders as well. The information that we are going to bring to you tonight comes from our professional staff, our government and nonprofit partners, which includes the Department of Insurance in California and the Division of Insurance in Colorado, as well as the local officials that are supporting your recovery in both areas. We also get a lot of help and information from volunteers. We have two of them with us tonight. We have people that we refer to sometimes as fired up survivors. These are people who've been through a catastrophic loss and have information and knowledge that they want to pay forward to you. And then a lot of our information comes from consumer-oriented professionals, lawyers, estimators, public adjusters, CPAs with casualty loss experience, and then construction and real estate professionals. And the program tonight is under our Roadmap to Recovery program, but the work that we do around underinsurance also spans all three of our programs. You know, we try to help people avoid underinsurance through our preparedness work, and then through our advocacy and action work, we are constantly working in different levels behind the scenes to try to solve problems. And underinsurance is one of the top ones. that we do that we work on with our advocacy efforts. That's the library for those of you in California who lost your homes in last year. This is the library for those of you who lost homes in Colorado last year. A reminder that we're here as educators to give you information and general guidance, not legal advice. While underinsurance is an issue that many people find they need to get help from a lawyer to solve, and we do have wonderful lawyers in our Find Help directory, we can't endorse or warrant any of them. You really need to do your homework before you hire any professional. So even though you may find out about them through us, we still really encourage you to do your homework on any professional that you agree to pay to be your advocate. So I want to thank our guest speakers tonight. They're volunteering their time as educators. And with us tonight, we have Marcia Belfort, a 2017 wildfire survivor, and Neil Bordnave, 2018 wildfire survivor, and also a professional in the insurance world. Since probably most of you have been to our previous programs, you know about me. This is my life's work as a professional to be an advocate and a source of information for consumers of insurance, and to do everything that I can to make sure you get treated fairly when you have the occasion to have to use your insurance. Marcia is here with us, and Marcia, you're welcome to introduce yourself. But you got to go, there you go.
I'm Marcia Belforte, and I am obviously lost my house in the Tubbs wildfire, and I was a retired Seattle firefighter, and I became a fire inspector for Sonoma County, and I'm still an inspector for Sonoma County, but I was definitely well underinsured, so we'll talk about those things.
Yes, thank you. And you will be hearing Marcia's story of how she navigated the situation. Neil, oops. Neil, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Neil Bordnave. I am a campfire victim, but I've been an insurance broker agent for 34 years. I'm also faculty at Chico State teaching risk management and insurance. And since 2009, I have been doing expert witness work, which attorneys hire me to give opinions and opine on industry practices for the insurance industry. And a lot of what I do is what we call broker agent standard of care, and whether or not the broker or agent perform their job in placing the correct coverage for you, which we'll deal with in greater detail later on tonight.
Thank you, Neil. Okay, you don't need us to tell you this, because you no doubt probably know this already. Underinsurance is a recurring and challenging problem that surfaces after disasters. The average person is also underinsured for a total loss, but probably never will know it, doesn't know it. And the reason it surfaces after disasters is because when the whole house is gone, and in many cases, including the foundation, it stretches the limits of the policy. And sometimes we liken it to a car, that gets driven at its top speed. Normally, you don't drive a car at its top speed. You drive it at its top speed, things start falling off. But the reality is insurers don't tell you that. They didn't build this thing for a total loss. In fact, they tell you the opposite. So this problem is one of the toughest ones. It's not impossible to solve. That's why we're here tonight. We're going to give you Marcia's story of how she solved it. We're going to talk about how you can approach solving it, but we're going to really give you the lay of the land as honestly as we can. After pretty much every single wildfire that United Policyholders has helped people recover from, we have found a very similar figure. When we do our surveys, it pretty much is steady, a 2/3 number. And you can see that from 2 of our California surveys, and then East Troublesome Fire in Colorado in 2020. Again, that same stubborn 64% number. So it's obviously a problem that it's an insurance industry-wide problem. You can see that it doesn't matter what insurer you are with in many cases. I mean, there are variations, but pretty much people with almost every company have reported being underinsured. So it's not like, some companies, of course, sell better products. And we know some of you in Colorado have reported having something called a guaranteed replacement cost policy, but that's still very, very rare. It had disappeared completely in California. So what are some of the solutions that have been attempted to date in California? The legislature has twice mandated standardized disclosures of the differences between policies. We were involved in a several-year proceeding that resulted in regulations being put out that say what an insurance company must include when it estimates the replacement cost value at the point of sale. When the regulations were issued by our department, the first thing the insurance industry did was file a lawsuit through their trade association, but they lost and we won. The problem is that that the insurers held on to this notion that they don't have to do the estimate. So that's kind of been their hook, is like if that they will say that that they are supposed to, they know they're supposed to do it, but there's some ambiguity as to what their duty is. So in California, there is a law that's relatively new. So those of you who lost homes in 2020, you definitely, or 2021, you have the benefit of this requirement that the insurer every other year is supposed to give you an estimate of the replacement cost. Now, that is not the law in Colorado. So if you're in California, you have a much stronger case now because of all this work that we have done and other people have done. And the items that are supposed to be considered when the policy limits are set are all these things. And as you can see, there's a recognition that insurers have not been doing it right, but there's still a fight over who's responsible. Okay, so even in California, where we had the regs, the law says this section is not intended to change existing law with respect to the duty of the policyholder to select the coverage limit. So the game is still in play, and it shouldn't be a game, that's obvious. But the reason that you're all here is because we haven't solved this problem, that we are still working. We've made some inroads, but we haven't solved the problem. So in your state, in Colorado, in the aftermath of the Marshall Fire, Underinsurance has gotten a lot of coverage in the media. Very significant percentage of Marshall impacted homeowners are underinsured, possibly more than we normally see, but we don't know yet. Pressure is building on insurers to take responsibility and remedy the situation. I know probably a lot of you who are dialed in tonight are among those who are helping put that pressure on insurers. And when you read the coverage in the paper and you hear what Carol Walker says from the Insurance Industry Trade Association, you know that her argument sounds pretty weak, because obviously no one intentionally underinsures their biggest asset. And we know in most cases, you reasonably relied on the insurance professional that you are dealing with to adequately insure you. And we know that, and I think the courts know that too. Legislation is being considered, but even if we were to get something through, it's unlikely to be retroactive. So what we're going to be going through tonight is self-help remedies in the here and now that have helped people and that may help you. Just want you to know that right now, your division of insurance has what's called a data call underway, meaning they have issued a request to all the insurers in the state of Colorado to give them information, to give them this information. The policy limits for the total losses that have come in, and then looking at asking those insurers to tell them what coverages are in place on the policies that people have made claims under. So do those policies include building code compliance? Do they include extended replacement or guaranteed or full replacement costs? So they are looking to get a snapshot. They asked the insurers what software program they're using to establish the dwelling and presumably other structures be. And so this is the information they're asking the insurance industry for, and that information is still coming into them. And they are obviously trying to get their arms around the extent and severity of the problem. They know the problem's there. The commissioner and I were communicating about this probably the day after your fire or the day after that. So he's been well on notice that a lot of you are underinsured, and he is very much looking to see how he can help. And I think a lot of you may know your attorney general is also has expressed a very strong wish to help solve this problem with you and for you. So I very much encourage every one of you, if you haven't already, if you're underinsured, you must go on, stand up and be counted with the Department of Insurance. So even though they cannot be give you a private lawyer or be, sort of advocate for you one-on-one, long haul on your particular situation, they absolutely need your data to add to what they're getting from the insurance industry. So just an overview of the situation before we get into hearing from our special guests. The current laws don't reflect the reality of how the transaction really occurs. However, leverage may convince your insurer to pay above limits. And some of the leverage that you have can come from errors that the insurer and or their salesperson made when they sold you the policy, or when they did their paperwork on their end and issued the policy. Evidence, meaning records of communications, emails, letters, paperwork that has anything to do with the history of how the limits were set. Another thing that contributes to your leverage is political pressure, what I was talking about just now with the AG and the Department of Insurance and bad publicity. Those things make it to the attention of the higher ups at insurance companies, and often contribute to them making a business decision to pay over limits in certain situations. And that includes assistance from the Department of Insurance. So technically, what a lot of people do is they seek, and this is sort of a legal term, retroactive reformation of policy limits, meaning a policy is a contract. You can reform a contract retroactively if both parties to the contract agree. And in this case, that's kind of the technical way of expressing what you're asking the insurance company to do. You're asking them to retroactively reform that contract to where the dwelling limit should have been, and you can offer to pay the difference in premiums. If you had insured my home adequately, and I'm happy to pay the difference in the premium. And then in many cases, people find that they have to get their leverage from filing a lawsuit against the agent, broker, and insurer individually or in a group, meaning like a multi-plaintiff case or a class action case. So it can be very difficult to do this on your own. And you'll hear from Marcia, even she did confer with a lawyer at some point. So Neil, before we go any further, how do limits get set in real life?
Well, limits are typically set when you meet with a broker, communicate with a broker agent and say, I want to insure a home. And most agents, especially in California, are required to use a software provided by the insurance company that establishes a replacement cost valuations. Agents typically are experienced in setting those limits, and other replacement cost calculators, but the insureds, historically just rely on, they go to them and say, I just bought a house, I need to buy a policy for my loan. What do I need to do? And that agent usually gives them that number, and that's what they accept. And it's, the problems occur, either they do it wrong the first time, or they did it and then 10 years later no one's touched this thing, and you find out there's been an underinsurance issue for a variety of reasons.
So yeah, so getting an insurer to pay more than their contract says that you owe you is not easy, but can be and has been done. And although the contract is a legal written document, there are invisible terms that our laws add to them to make sure they're enforced fairly. So every policy sold in both your states, California and Colorado, has an invisible clause that a court would read into the policy saying that the insurance company has to act in good faith and deal fairly with you. So that's when you hear people throw around the terminology bad faith, really all they're talking about is reasonable and unreasonable conduct. So an insurance company and or its agents cannot deceive or mislead you. They have to live up to promises that they made to you. The problem for a lot of people in this situation, it's very hard to prove the promises that they made to you because they were made in the past. And or, most people do not do what we recommend that you do during your insurance claim, and that is to be a relentless note taker. Most people don't do that. But if you, and so they often, it's a sort of a he said, she said, and it can be very hard to prove that the insurer, the salesperson assured you that the policy that we're selling you would be adequate for your needs. But not having that proof makes it pretty tricky. But how often did you speak with your agent, or did you buy your policy online? What, if any, specific conversations do you remember? If you have any ads? I mean, this is kind of, I know, painful to say because, of course, if you've lost your home, you've lost your records. But anything that you can get your hands on that's digital can be helpful. Certainly, if your insurer or your agent said they needed to come out and inspect, hopefully you said yes, and if they did, that can be helpful. Hopefully you never refused a recommended increase, but hey, we know how the world works, and no one is enthusiastic about paying for insurance, and it's very natural to think that, hey, if an insurance agent is getting paid a commission, it's very natural to assume that they want to sell you more than you need. So it's not, if it's normal, to ask, oh, well, is there anything we can do to bring the price down? And that's part of I think the problem that keeps this situation perpetuating, this underinsurance situation, is that very often an agent or the insurer, they know that people are price sensitive and they want to make the sale. So sometimes they will overlook the details, and unfortunately the money is in the details. Okay, so did you notify your insurer of major improvements or remodeling? Those are some of the things that matter. So I'm going to skip through some of this now that you have access to this deck, but just so that you have like a feel for the lay of the legal landscape. Just know that an insurer generally in both states has only what's called a general duty to procure insurance. Okay, meaning not necessarily a special duty to procure adequate insurance. For various reasons, the courts have been reluctant to hold insurance salespeople to that kind of a standard. But as I said, there's a lot of pressure being brought on the insurance industry to do better because there's been so much horrible fallout from their failure to insure properties adequately, and there's been an increasing amount of attention paid to that, to their failure. So in your spare time, you're welcome to go on our website, type Underinsurance in the search box, and you'll see a lot of materials. You can read examples of lawsuits people have brought. You can see a lot of historical information about how people have been strategizing, why this problem keeps going on. So now we're going to hear one household story. Marcia Belforte, take it away.
I moved into my home in 2012, and over the next 5 years, my home and I went through lots of changes, a small remodel, changes to the landscaping, a divorce, etc. Throughout it all, I kept my insurance agent informed. Then, on October 19th, 2017, we fled our home during the Tubbs fire, which ultimately burned my home and our subdivision to the ground, along with 5,000 homes in the region. Fortunately, I thought I had insurance to rebuild the way it was, as I had homeowners insurance and my trusted insurance agent. Unfortunately, like most others, discovered we were significantly underinsured and would need to battle to make ourselves whole again. Let me walk you through my recovery process. Immediately after the fire, I contacted my insurance company to get the process started. I was assigned a friendly adjuster who lived in another state. He arranged an initial check arranged for an initial check to give for some money and for living expenses to be covered, as I stayed in touch with the adjuster at least every week and sometimes daily. Then United Policyholders held a meeting, and I began working on getting my claim processed and settled. I learned from UP, the meeting, the invaluable instruction to keep written notes on every conversation I had about insurance and rebuilding. This is essential. Given all that is happening and the trauma of the loss, it is easy to forget even important meetings and conversations. I requested my insurance policy, including endorsements, and read it. And then I reread it many times. I asked a lot of questions of the adjuster, United Policyholders, others who had the same insurance carrier, so I could understand my policy. Ultimately, I developed a network of reliable information sources. I contacted and talked to numerous builders, the county building department, others in the neighborhood who had lost their homes to determine what the cost to rebuild would be. When it became apparent that my insurance company interpreted my policy as covering less than 75% of the cost to rebuild, I contacted State Insurance Commissioner. They were very helpful. After a series of letters with them acting as the go-between between my insurer and myself, it was evident they were not going to budge. Because I was so underinsured and my insurer was so intransigent, the insurance commissioner offered me a no-cost mediation with my insurer, and I accepted. By the time I arrived at mediation, I had done my homework and I knew my policy better than anyone there. I also knew what the company had advertised and had stated in news articles. I discovered they had sent an outdated policy to me twice, and that there were inconsistencies within the policy and in the promotional letters they sent out to fire survivors. I noted that the remodel I had done just after purchasing the house was not in my policy. It became rapidly evident in the mediation that the insurer was on weak ground. They balked. Finally, they said they needed to consult their legal team, and would be back in touch. This ended the mediation. Weeks went by with no resolution and minimal contact with my insurer. So I hired an attorney who happened to be on the board of United Policyholders. His letters to my insurer brought home the point that my case was strong and they should settle or go to court. In the end, they did settle for an amount that allowed me to rebuild, and it was over my policy limits. So my takeaways on this, when you're having to rebuild, there's so many decisions to make and you forget a lot of things. So as I said, keep notes. The rebuilding process is really long. You can see the dates on these slides. It took me just over 3 years before I moved back home. I know many others that are still not home. and it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. While settling your insurance claim takes a lot of time, it is also important to take time for your own physical and mental health and that of your family. It is okay to tell the insurance adjuster that you need extra time in order to take care of yourself and your family. Develop a support network. Know and understand your policy and all the endorsements down to the individual words. I'm not kidding you, every word. Don't take the insurer's word on what things mean. Read it and understand it for yourself. Know your home, any upgrades, the contents, and everything about it that is covered or may not be covered in your policy. Do not give up. Keep trying. Keep asking questions until you're satisfied. The insurance company exists to make their business money. So it is logical that they do not want to give you their money. Be reasonable, justify the reasons why they must pay your claim. Settling with the insurance company was an enormous and at times emotionally taxing effort, but ultimately it was worth it. We moved back in our home just after the 3rd anniversary of the fire. And along the way, the people at United Policyholders proved invaluable in guiding us on what to do and what was the next step. Without their help, I seriously would not have been able to rebuild my home. So thank you.
Marcia, thank you so much for sharing those slides and your journey. And if you don't mind sticking around, we of course welcome you to offer any further thoughts as we go along.
Sure.
But we're going to take a little deep breath to kind of digest all of that we've heard so far. A few claim handling reminders, very much along the lines of what you just heard from Marcia. Keeping a journal, so important. Saving receipts. You've heard us recommend that you either open a separate bank account for your insurance funds. Actually, not either, that you do that. Consider a special email account for your claim to separate claim-related emails from other items. And then we give you a link to a spreadsheet that one of our volunteers who went through a fire created. He modified an Excel spreadsheet and donated it to us for your use. And a reminder that your communications with your insurer should confirm that you're cooperating. Just as Marcia said, tell them what you need, want, and why. Give them good reasons. Ask what they need from you to keep things moving. And then point out specific things they have or haven't done that are holding up resolution of your claim. Politely remind them about your challenging situation. Give them a specific time frame to reply, follow up, and follow up again. Reminder about negotiation best practices. As emotional as this situation is, keep it professional as you can. Be as concise and specific in your communications. Bold and bullet point your request. Know that that the longer your letter is, the less likely it is to get read thoroughly. So keeping it as succinct as you can is good. Avoid long paragraphs. Try to use good grammar and punctuation so they know that you are a force to be reckoned with. Promptly respond to reasonable requests. And try to avoid venting your frustrations and emotions to your adjuster because, as Marcia said, to them, this is a business transaction. Where does your personal leverage come from? This tragedy turned your life upside down. You're doing your best with the many details. If you have special circumstances, of course, you point those out. And that insurers have made concessions to others. I know Marcia is just one of many people that have been able to negotiate an above limit settlement. Not everyone can. That's just life, but you can certainly try. And a reminder that going up the chain to get attention and results is obviously what you need to do in this situation, because you're the adjuster that's assigned to your claim does not have the authority to pay over limits. You're going to have to be dealing with somebody much higher up at the company, and getting up there is it can often, it's much easier to get up the chain once you have filed a request for assistance with your division of insurance. And so that's one of the other reasons we recommend it. Vague threats to sue are rarely effective. So I don't think, Marcia, you didn't actually file a lawsuit, but you had a lawyer write letters on their letterhead. Is that right?
Yeah, it was mainly the letter writing that was a thing that pushed it over. They just weren't communicating, and having someone of quote unquote authority
Right.
do that was what changed it for me. Yeah.
And I will fess up that that's a little, you were lucky to have Dan do that, because the truth is, most of the lawyers that have the fortitude and the financial strength to undertake a lawsuit on contingency against an insurance company. So like, you don't pay them by the hour, you pay them a percentage of what they recover for you. Most of those men and women, they're pretty busy. They're not a lot of them, and they don't like to do hourly work usually. So can be hard to find a lawyer who's like a litigator to do letters by the hour. It can be done for sure. I just don't, we want to keep everyone's expectations realistic here. So now a little bit from Neil, who is both an insurance expert, but also a wildfire survivor. So Neil, what is the standard of care for an insurance broker or agent selling you home insurance? Let's make sure we still have. Oh, Neil, you're on mute. Sorry.
There you go. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
The agent or broker has to use reasonable care, diligence, and judgment to procure the coverage requested. And you'll find this standard is applicable in California, in Colorado, and virtually throughout the United States. And when they consult with you and tell you that your home is insured and they've got a replacement cost valuation and you paid a premium for it, your expectation is that they've performed their job with reasonable care, diligence, and judgment. And you don't want to find out that it's underinsured by 30, 40, 50%.
So so what do they have a duty to volunteer that you should buy extra coverages?
They generally speaking, they do not, but that's from a legal standpoint. But from a practical standpoint, when you go and meet with your agent or talk to your agent on the phone, they do advise you. They do tell you that. And when they take that step and say, this is what we recommend, they're becoming an advisor, and they're advising on what insurance to buy. And it does create a higher standard. And it's one of the things I run into as an insurance expert is after a loss, the agent says, I'm just an order taker. They told me what they wanted.
Right.
And that doesn't happen in reality.
No.
You call them and say, I need homeowners insurance because I just bought a house or I want a competitive quote. And they come to you and they give you that information. So I find this duty not to volunteer is really, they're kind of hiding behind what actually happens when they accept your account and place coverage on your behalf.
Absolutely. I always say, like, can you imagine, you walk into an insurance agent's office and you say, okay, I want to put insurance on my home. And they say, well, how much do you want? And you'd be like, why are they asking me? Okay, well, I don't know. You tell me. And if that agent were to say, well, I can't tell you how much to put, you'd be out of there in about 2 seconds, right?
I've said that in depositions and in trial probably 100 times.
Yeah.
Because if an agent said, I can't tell you what coverage you need, you're going to go find an agent who will. And it's,
Right.
there's lots of agents out there and lots of good agents, but make them do their job.
Right. I will say this before we get to this next point about what if they do volunteer. In both states, there are laws on the books that require insurers to offer specific things at the point of sale. So in Colorado, as a result of lots of hard work by us and many others, friends in the legislature in 2013, your insurer the agent was supposed to offer you 20% extended coverage and 24 months of ALE. We're finding in a lot of situations, people say that did not happen. But so Neil, what happens when an agent does volunteer to adequately insure your home?
Yeah, when they take on, what we call a professional responsibility, they take on a role as a trusted advisor, and good agents do that. And I've seen, and even though I'm a broker agent myself, I've dealt with many agents over the years. And one of the things I like about State Farm is they always go out and inspect the property. And when you have a skilled professional coming out and you're inspecting a property, then they go back to the office and grossly underinsure it. That's falling below the standard of care. And it happens quite frequently, sadly. But and most layperson just don't know that they're getting bad advice from their agent. But when they do go out and look at the property, when they do advise you on what the limits should be, they're taking on a professional responsibility.
So, so we describe these as sort of helpful facts, meaning helpful in the context of trying to remedy underinsurance. If the agent, broker, or insurer misrepresented the nature, scope, or extent of coverage. Marcia, I think you mentioned that you got your hands on some advertisements or some materials like that.
Yeah, there was a letter that came out from the president of AAA, and he represented the fact that we are going to cover you, we're going to make you whole. And so I brought that up in the mediation. I said, well, what about this? That's not what you're doing. That's not what your policy says. It's not what I'm reading. So then they had to leave the room.
Mm-hmm.
Legal staff again. But yeah, there was all kinds of advertisements out there like that.
Mm-hmm. So Neil, you can see here number 3, this not just he said, she said, like in the cases where you have been an expert, is it often come down to that? Is there evidence that something was said or not said?
Yeah, of course. And when I look at it, in the course of discovery, they're required to give their files, and you review those files, and you look at emails and communications. And I'll give you one really quick example. I was talking about State Farm. I have a case out of Napa, California, which had some serious wildfires. And the agent had gone to a property and then came back to the office and rated it up at $600,000 for replacement costs. The insured said, yeah, that doesn't seem right. The agent said, okay, we'll bump that up to $1 million. And the insured relied on that. And it turns out through this whole litigation process where he was really grossly underinsured, is that property, the day the agent went to look at it, would have had a replacement cost of almost $2 million. And that conduct of going and looking at something and incorrectly rating it up, and the agent even testified that the rating models are always incorrect. And he didn't tell the agent that our models are always incorrect. And this guy ended up with a huge gap in coverage. So, have a confidence level in who you're dealing with and educate yourself.
So we have some steps that we've laid out for approaching this situation. 1, check your policy for obvious errors. I'm sure all of you have done this already by now, but there may be wrong square footage or even maybe the wrong address, and that can help your case for retroactively adjusting. We do recommend that you calculate the cost to rebuild your home as was, what your home should have been insured for. We get this question a lot. We've gotten it a lot in our previous webinars for the recent fires. People say, well, I'm so obviously underinsured. Do I really have to go to all this trouble to get an accurate as was rebuild calculation? For two reasons. I'm not going to rebuild that house anyway, even if I am able to get a loan or figure something out. So that's one reason. But another reason is, why spend money if I have to pay somebody to give me an estimate when again I'm underinsured? And so our answer though is, you got to have some basis for the number that you're looking for, right? I mean, it certainly yeah. So that's the bottom line. You have to, if you're asking them to retroactively reform, you do have to have some kind of reasonable idea of what. Step 3, reviewing the history of how and when your limits were set. Did you remodel, refinance? Did you change insurers? Did you change agents? Did something trigger you to contact the insurance company to seek reassurance that you were covered? And did they give you that reassurance? And do you have any of that in writing? So, and of course, in certainly in Colorado, you had big wildfires the year before, and a couple of years before that. There's been some awareness in regions where there have been fires that it's very common for people to come up short on their insurance. So maybe you read an article and maybe you contacted your agent or broker. Neil, when you're just addressing a room or a virtual room here of people who are really suffering, it's hard to want to go too deep into why insurance companies continue to underinsure. But I guess I feel like I have to ask you, obviously they're wanting to limit their exposure at some level. They don't want to lose a sale. But there's somebody who told you, somebody who works for State Farm, who said, oh, those their calculators are wrong. So is this just ineptitude combined, or is it evil? What's going on here?
Yeah, it's probably a combination of the above. I mean, the one example I gave, the State Farm agent had been there for 35 years. He knew better. He knew what that house cost. And one of the things I think you touched on it with sales is, when you're quoting something, it's based on policy limits. And if you keep the policy limits down, your premiums are going to be lower than the competitor. And it's kind of a hidden thing. It's really tough to prove intent. But I've seen that do with a number of different carriers, where they come in and lower the numbers to get the account and worry about, whether someone's actually going to have a loss and the problems that are going to occur. So, always buy from a really good carrier with good ratings, and don't be afraid to pay reasonable premiums to cover your properties. It's very important.
Well, of course, it's a killer for people now in this situation, because when they see how relatively little it would have cost to buy more coverage, it's agonizing. So we feel your pain. That's why we're bringing you this program. So step 4, if possible, seek out and compare notes with other people who are underinsured by the same company, and even more so by the same agent. So like after the Oakland fire in 1991, which kind of was the birth of this organization, there were so many people who were underinsured by the same agent that the Department of Insurance issued a big fine against him, and that sort of caused his employer to have to really pay above limits to his customers. So those of you who have been, I know there's if you're on a listserv or you're participating in Survivor to Survivor, we're doing everything we can to facilitate people forming groups by insurance company and communicate with each other. I mean, this is one of those areas where you'll see, when people have gotten together and filed group lawsuits because they were all underinsured with the same company. That can be a good way to go. Because if you don't have the evidence, if you don't have the notes and you don't have the advertisements, and all you have is not enough insurance, but you don't have enough to kind of get establish that special duty, you can participate in a group lawsuit that attacks their process, their software, how they set limits. And we're, United Policyholders, we're very survivor centric, survivor oriented, meaning we're not here to push you to hire lawyers or push you to hire PAs or push you to hire a particular contractor. We're here to help you find the best path for you that works for you to get through this recovery process and get every dollar out of your insurance policy that's available. So when we talk about lawsuits, we're not here trying to push you in one direction. We don't get money for that kind of thing. We're not, we're a pretty pure, very ethical 501c3. So it's not, we have no stake in whether you go out and file a lawsuit. We're just giving you the straight scoop, what we have seen work, okay, for people.
Amy, can I just touch on one thing that is
Sure.
really outside of what I was broker agents, but in the Camp Fire, there was an insurance company that had insured a lot of houses that when they became aware of the Camp Fire, they actually called the Department of Insurance and said, we can't pay these claims. And, the Department of Insurance took them over because they didn't have assets or surplus to pay losses. So
Right.
Deal with a financially strong A+ rated carrier, because if they don't have the money, you're out of luck.
Right. And that was just one insurer, a small-ish.
Yeah.
So hopefully, knock on wood, no one out your way has that situation. But okay, true that. Step 5, make a clear written demand that your insurer honor the promises that were made to put you back where you were before the loss. Of course, letting them know you're underinsured through no fault of your own, and then telling them as best you can how much you think that you should have been insured for based on what the replacement cost value of your as was home is known to you now. We already went over this. We had a lot of insurers after Marcia's fire sending people questionnaires. Her community, we made a lot of noise about the underinsurance situation. And insurers, and a lot of people said, some insurers said, okay, we're gonna take your statement under oath. We're gonna grill you under oath, and you have to, when you answer, you got to be truthful, all that. And of course, that's very intimidating to a lot of people. Plus, who can remember, a lot of these things? And so people asked, okay, give it to us in writing. If you give us the questions in writing, we'll answer them. So some insurers started sending people questionnaires. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. So, again, we ran over some of these before, some of the leverage, the things that give you personal leverage. And how that paper trail factors in. Marcia, it sounded to me like some of the things that the insurer did in adjusting your claim did kind of factor in during the mediation. Is that true? Like, in other words, things that they, like coverages they didn't inform you about, or misrepresentations that they made to you, that kind of gave you some leverage in the mediation. Is that true?
I think what really gave me the leverage was the 2 incorrect policies they sent, Amy, because the endorsement, people never read those little teeny tiny skinny pieces of paper. Well, there was one word that was changed in the endorsement, which mainly said that you are responsible afterwards, after they change it. It implied that you're responsible to determine your cost to rebuild. in the previous one, it was their responsibility. And that's the one they sent me twice. So I said, look, you know, that was one thing. And then then the agent never put on the remodel. It was a $60,000 remodel back in 2012. And it was never adjusted on the policy. And I'm telling you, the insurance company went back, they listened to voicemail records because they didn't want to pay that. And they went back and they found the conversation when I called the agent and I said, hey, I didn't have a record of that, but I forced them to go back to go find that. And so those were really some of the big things, and the conflict with with what their advertising was, but they kind of poo-pooed that a little bit. But I think those other two things were the most important items.
Okay, so this is an example of one of the questionnaires that that one insurance company was giving people who filed a complaint, said they were underinsured and sought a remedy. So these are some of the questions, that they were asking. So you can see what mattered, what the insurance company considered relevant to their consideration of the history of how your limits were set.
And Amy, just touching on that, they never ask any of that information when they wrote the policy. It's only after there's a loss.
Right. It's completely not fair, right? I mean, most people, what is, 15 minutes, right? How many square feet of living space? And, maybe a few questions about the finishes, maybe. But, very often, I spent a day in an agent's office trying to watching him generate quotes, and he just would take, what the insured, just very few details, and then put it in and run it through a software program, and then spits out the limit. And obviously, you all know the rest of that. So step 6 is consult with an experienced policyholder attorney. And this is really if you've done what you can on your own, and the insurer says we won't even talk to you, then the next step is to talk to an experienced policyholder attorney, and that really can be easier said than done. As I said earlier, there are lots of lawyers out there that do all kinds of things, but there aren't that many lawyers that would describe themselves as a policyholder lawyer, meaning somebody who has represented people in insurance claim disputes. We have worked very hard to find those people. We use them as volunteers. We use them for our clinics. Some of them support us, and only the lawyers that are actually currently supporting us are in our directory. But there are other ones out there. We just say our directory is a good place to start. And then just ideally, before if the insurer asks to take your statement under oath or, over the phone on the circumstances about how your limits were set, we really recommend doing that you run your facts by a lawyer ideally first before you answer those questions, because I mean, it's great that you're here and you're learning from us, and hopefully you're absorbing all this good information. But at the end of the day, one bad answer can kind of be a problem for you. So it is just good to get guidance as you go. But what we're giving you here is guidance. I'm a lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice, but we are giving you the lay of the land here on how a lot of these underinsurance situations have played out in the past. So some of your options, like the logical sequence: get a reasonable idea of how much your home should have been insured for, notify the Division of Insurance that you're underinsured, file an official complaint, not just a phone call, but actually complete the paperwork, to be officially on record, right? And California, they call it an RFA, request for assistance. In Colorado, they would just call it a consumer complaint. Collect all the evidence that gives you leverage, make your written request, and if necessary, consult or retain an attorney. Go to mediation if available. Now, I want to say that the California Department of Insurance has a mediation program that the legislature created and funded. Colorado doesn't have that, but many courts will offer mediation services. And I know, Neil, didn't you say that you used small claims court to get something paid?
Yeah, on one of my rental properties, the carrier, and I'll say the carrier, it was AAA, who kind of fought me the whole way on every step of my claim. And fortunately, I have a pretty good knowledge, and I could challenge them. But one of them was loss of rents, and I had a limit that I paid for. It was on their policy, and after the first year, well, I had 3 years to buy a replacement property, and after the first year, they kept trying to stop paying my loss of rents because I hadn't found a replacement property. At the 2-year mark, they did stop paying it, even though I had an additional $8,000 owed. And so when I did find a replacement property, I said, you owe me this additional loss of rents. They said no, and I took them to small claims court. And when they showed up, you have to go to mediation before you get a trial. And they came in and said, yeah, we're just going to pay him his money. But I had to fight for it. And
thanks for wasting my time.
yeah.
So yeah, mediation is an informal, voluntary, non-binding process for conducting settlement negotiations. It can be fast and inexpensive, and can work, but you have to be prepared. You cannot go into a mediation and think that charm is going to get you through. You have to have evidence, and you have to be really. You heard Marcia say her mediation got interrupted, and it didn't settle. I remember, Marcia, actually, we were so sad, but then it did. So, it can be a great way to try to get some information out of your insurer over what they know and what they have in the way of evidence. But again, it may be, if it's available to you as an option, and you can see the pros. Inexpensive. If you don't like the result, you can walk away. It's efficient way of putting the dispute behind you. Generally speaking, though, there's just like we were talking about how the adjuster that you're dealing with right now, trying to get them to talking to them about the fact that you're underinsured and that and seeking a remedy through them is a little bit of a waste of time, because they just don't have that authority. They just don't. So you got to get over their head in order to really have that conversation. And it's the same thing at a mediation. If the person that the insurance company sends doesn't have the authority to cut a check in the amount that you're looking for, it's not going to resolve there. But sometimes it will resolve after. I apologize for the slides jumping. What are the cons? Mediation, the insurance company may not be seriously interested in settling, but they're checking you out. They want to assess like what kind of a witness you're going to be, and how strong your evidence is and all that. And sometimes the mediator will try to scare you or them in order to try to bring a settlement together. So you may leave feeling like it was a waste of time or money, but because you've come to this program, you're now educated to know that what to expect and to keep your expectations modest for that. So litigation, as I said, you can, if you just say, look, I cannot undertake this full-time job here of pushing this on my own. I just want to get a lawyer to take this over for me and take a crack at it. If you don't have great evidence from a he said, she said standpoint where you kind of like what Marcia had with the mistakes that they made, then you may want to just go after the fact that that they are not this sort of systemic fraud, that they are representing to their customers that this is a replacement value policy, and it isn't. And so you can approach that by being part of a multi-plaintiff case. Neil, like suing the agent or broker, E&O stands for errors and omissions. When would somebody do that as opposed to suing the insurance company? You're on, I'm sorry, you got to unmute.
So first, the importance of finding a skilled insurance litigator that knows policyholders with them, versus, a personal injury lawyer. You got to have someone that knows how to deal with insurance companies. Yeah. But depending on what the dispute is, if both the insurance company is acting badly and you've got a valid complaint against the broker, I would name them both, from the get-go, and say, just bring in, the parties and say, this is a complaint, this is what we're going for, and get them to the table and negotiate resolution.
Yep. And just so everyone knows, GFFD stands for good faith and fair dealing. So that's that, when I was talking about the invisible language, that they will behave reasonably and in good faith. So filing a complaint with the department is so important, elevates your situation, and gets you a little bit more attention. And it's been surprising to myself and my team over the years that while over half of people who take our surveys report that they had a problem with their insurance company, only half of them have filed a formal complaint with their state Department of Insurance. So a lot of people are afraid that filing a complaint is going to get them in trouble or that kind of thing. And we really have found it's the opposite. It really does get more attention. So these are just some of the examples. When I talked to you about these group lawsuits, this was a complaint that was brought against an insurance company for underinsuring CSAA. And Matthew Kwan, who was the lead plaintiff, lost his home in the same fire that took Marcia's home. And, he organized a group with help from us. And then they ultimately did get a settlement. I mean, it took a couple years.
I was wondering about that. I never knew what happened to him because I met him in one of the meetings.
Yeah, he disappeared. Same thing with this one. This was a group suit brought against USAA, I believe. It's cut off there on the bottom. Took a couple years, but it did settle. And that sort of brings me to, before we take our deep breath, because we're almost to the end here, is that not only, Marcia, you are under a confidentiality agreement, right? You cannot say how much they paid, right?
That's correct.
Right. So what I want everybody to know is, and we get this question a lot, is if you do this on your own, very good likelihood that your insurance company is going to ask you to sign something. In California, it's called a white waiver, that says, I agree that our settlement discussions are confidential and that they cannot be used in a court of law down the road. And the reason that they do that is because even though they might be willing to talk with you about paying you over your limits, they don't want to set a precedent. They want to keep it quiet because they don't want other people knowing that they caved in one situation, right? So as much as it may pain you to sign one of those things, it's fine to sign it. Just make sure it's time limited and it only covers the period of time when you're discussing a potential settlement. All right. So let's just take a deep breath and then we're going to get into the home stretch and wrap up. Okay, so what we've done here is just give you in this deck, which you can access on our website, where you can find your leverage and where you can find your legal rights. These are the sources, your insurance, state's insurance laws, regulations, the language in your policy. You heard Marcia say how incredibly important it is to read and really get comfortable with that language. So I'm going to skip through these because we really don't need to go. We're not going to go into any more detail here, but just know that all these regulations and laws are both in the deck tonight, but they're also on our website. So you can see here, this was the requirement in Colorado that your insurer at the point of sale offer you extended replacement of at least 20% of your dwelling. And also they were supposed to offer you at least 10% of your for law and ordinance for upgrades to comply with current building codes. They were also supposed to offer you 24 months of ALE. So this kind of goes to that same issue we've been talking about of like, if they didn't do it, what proof do you have that they didn't do it? So again, we're just going to skip through these. These are all the bulletins that have been issued since the Marcia fire and before. What can you do with all this? Use these resources as a tool to get you what you need. These are just some of the materials that you'll find on our website that may be helpful to you on dispute resolution. We really encourage you to stay informed, stay with us. If you know somebody who hasn't been coming to our webinars, let them know, encourage them to sign up. Those of you who know, we have these survivor to survivor forums. They're really a great source of information from your neighbors about what they're up to, what they're trying to do. But it's really more a place to kind of commune with other people in your situation and support each other. Because, one of the reasons we wanted to have Marcia and Neil is because, there's nothing like homegrown wisdom, that to be real, and knowing what other people have tried. This is where you can go to find out what events we have upcoming. Now, I know that some of you have been out there grinding your teeth tonight thinking, why don't I get to use the Q&A and ask questions? And I think hopefully you can now understand why we didn't for tonight, because we really wanted to present this to you in an informational format so that you could really digest these concepts for yourself and really think on it, because we're not able to be your free lawyer or give you one-on-one individual advice all the way through, as much as we would love to do that. We are, a nonprofit that has a relatively small team, and we just cannot do that. But we're doing everything we can to give you access to those one-on-one answers that you want. So we do have a legal clinic coming up. Almost as soon as we noticed it, the slots got filled up, and I apologize for that. But we are relying on volunteers to staff those clinics. We will be doing another one. We will be, we have 2 more webinars coming up this month, plus the Survivor to Survivor. And then in April, we will be offering another Q&A where we will give you opportunities to get individual questions asked. A reminder about your division of insurance and how to get in touch with them. A reminder about the California department, how to get in touch with them. A thank you to the Community Foundation of Boulder, and then to our California funders, RCRC, that stands for Rural County Representatives of California. These are elected officials that support us and that partner with us and that are supporting tonight's program. So I want to thank again Marcia and Neil and my team, Val Brown on the Spanish channel, our translator, Eva, on tech. And I wish all of you a healthy, safe evening and continued fortitude on your road to recovery. And we will be seeing you again very soon. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Be well.